Susan! Chris's voice rang with tension, and irritation was red in his eyes. How are you not aware of the obvious? Why do you refuse to listen to me? The girl looked at her childhood friend with a hard look. What does he allow himself? He literally tramples with his dirty boots in her Garden of Eden. Chris and Susan have been friends since childhood, more precisely from their school years. When they both arrived in first grade, the teacher took care of their seating arrangements. Then, it was customary to sit the girl next to the boy. There were not enough boys for the whole class because there were twice as many girls. But Susan Maxwell was lucky enough to sit next to Chris Adams. First graders were seated on the third deck from the edge, and they sat together until graduation. Chris was a cheerful, dark-haired boy with thoughtful gray eyes. From childhood, he loved books and military equipment. He was well-read and purposeful. Susan wore 2 huge bows in her blonde hair. She laughed loudly and could charm both adults and her classmates with a sincere smile. So Chris couldn't resist her charms. In high school, Chris was drawn to the society of guys, and Susan to girls' fun. Susan has grown into the first beauty of the school. At discos, a line of people who wanted to invite her to dance lined up for her. Chris also enjoyed the attention of the girls, for which Susan constantly teased him. She teased him because she was jealous of her serious friend, although the proud girl would never admit it. At some point, she decided that she didn't want to spoil their friendship with a relationship. She changed guys like gloves, but not Chris. Chris remained her best friend, like a knight next to a princess. He always rescued her, helped her, supported her, protected her from offenders. The girl tried to be as wonderful a friend to the guy as he was to her. She trusted him with everything. And now, friends were 23 years old. They both received higher education. Chris graduated from the Naval College, but remained to serve in his hometown, fortunately for Susan. Susan chose the path of a public relations specialist. The spectacular blonde has been working as a PR specialist for a year, gaining experience in a well-known gaming company. At the same time, the girl dreamed of founding her own advertising agency in order to promote the company. A lively and purposeful PR manager was going to gather a team of experts from various fields under her wing and was already working on this project. Today, on a hot summer day, Chris and Susan met at their favorite cafe. There was a cozy atmosphere and a rich selection of coffee drinks, and vinyl records hung on the walls. The girl invited her friend to tell him important news. She is getting married. Ahmed proposed to her, and she was very happy with the anticipation of a new life in Turkey, in a luxurious mansion among the seas and sandy beaches. But Chris didn't share her happiness, overreacting. Now she looked thoughtfully at the beautiful profile of her friend, who now frowned and stared stubbornly out the window of the coffee shop, blushing with indignation. But he was infinitely sweet to her, even so harmful and evil. Susan thought sadly, I'm going to have to end my relationship with Chris. And not because of the distance. Her groom, Ahmed, is very jealous. He pointed out many times that such a close relationship between his fiancée and another man was unacceptable. The girl was pleased that he was jealous. However, she sincerely loved Chris as a kind and close friend. Therefore, even the thought of parting with him was bitter and tormented her heart. Although it will be easier for her to survive parting with him if he doesn't stop swearing. But the guy couldn't come to terms with the choice of a girlfriend. The guy continued, turning his face to the girl. Your groom is using you. He needs a doll as a slave. He will bring you there as a souvenir from a distant land. And he will show you to relatives and friends. A rare kind of person, a natural blonde. The girl smiled, shaking her head. But the guy didn't think to stop, cursing more and more and predicting Susan's future life. Chris nervously stirred the sugar in the cup, categorically describing the fate of the Turk's bride. He will put a paranja on you, make you cook dolma from morning to night, periodically interrupting to give birth to children. And if you have a son, you will not see him. By the way, you can forget about your career and the creation of your own company because he will not support you. You will receive the status of wife, which means you will stay at home. Please listen to me. I tell you all this as a best friend. Have I ever lied to you? The blonde couldn't stand it, putting the cup on the saucer with a clang. You know what? If you were my best friend, you would rejoice in my happiness. And you were just talking nasty things to me. I'm telling the truth. Sometimes it can be very bitter. The girl waved her hand dismissively. You think in stereotypes and are biased towards Ahmed. The traditions you speak of are gone. Ahmed and his family are progressive people. The guy objected. You don't want to take off your rose-colored glasses. Turkey continues to be a patriarchal country despite its progressiveness. Their love for tradition has not gone away. You will become a housewife and a slave. And I'm sure you won't be his last wife. Susan was sincerely indignant. There's no polygamy in Turkey. Officially no, and officially yes, and you may not know about other wives. The girl tensed, furrowing her perfect brows. What do you mean by that? Chris willingly explained. I want to say that Turkey is an Eastern country in which Muslim traditions are still alive. It looks like he obviously thought a lot about Ahmed and his life. Susan, a Muslim can have up to 4 wives. Other women will not be official wives, but concubines or mistresses of your Ahmed. The occasional cafe patrons looked in their direction, puzzled. Susan's lips trembled slightly. Resentment at a friend covered the girl with her head. Why is he doing this? Can't he just be happy for his girlfriend? But he ruined everything. The guy was confused. Susan, why are you upset? Chris was instantly despondent, noticing that his friend's blue eyes filled with tears. All his stock of anger was gone, and his expression changed to one of timidity and concern. Chris was instantly there, sitting on the couch next to the girl. He grabbed her by the shoulders, pulling her towards him. The girl buried her face into the guy's chest, sobbing. Chris tightly pressed the girl to him. Susan heard his heart beating frantically in his chest, as if it was about to jump out of there. He said softly, Susan, I'm worried about you. If you leave, I won't protect you there. You understand me? The girl muttered into her friend's t-shirt. Maybe it's time for me to start taking care of myself. But the guy didn't answer her. That evening, Chris didn't offer to walk Susan home or take her out a little longer, contrary to the usual tradition. He referred to some important matters. Susan smiled and nodded knowingly, but she knew Chris too well. He lied. The girl looked after the departing friend for a long time, until he disappeared into the crowd of passers-by. Chris didn't look back. His heart ached in his chest. However, Susan straightened her hair, forcing herself to smile. She scolded herself mentally. Why are you sad? You are the bride. Rejoice in it. The girl's phone rang, and the screen flashed. Kirsten, tutor. The girl said into the phone. Hello. Good evening, Kirsten. The woman said in a business-like voice. Hi, Susan. I remind you of the first lesson. Today at 8 o'clock. Is everything okay? The girl confirmed. Yes, of course. I'm already leaving for you. Susan hailed a taxi and gave the address to where Kirsten lived. The woman taught Turkish. When Susan called her last week, the tutor promised her that she could teach her satisfactorily, or even speak Turkish well, in no time. The idea to learn Turkish came spontaneously. The girl was watching some series with subtitles in Turkish, and she liked various beautiful and melodic words. And then she came up with a plan. She will secretly learn her groom's native language and be sure to surprise him at the wedding. What a surprise it will be when she starts to say a beautiful speech during the wedding in his native language. 2 months remained before the important event. Therefore, Susan planned to activate all the internal reserves and learn all the mysteries of a foreign language. While the taxi was taking her to the other side of the city, Susan looked out the window at cars, people, road signs rushing by, but she didn't really see it all. The girl's thoughts carried her far into the memories of her personal Eastern tale. Ahmed conquered Susan, no matter how angry and sarcastic Chris was. She met a foreigner in the place where all the progressive people of mankind are, on the internet, on a dating website for foreigners. She checked in as a joke. But everything turned into marriage and moving to another country. Yes, she's lucky. When Ahmed wrote to Susan, she didn't take him seriously. She just started talking to a foreigner. But an interesting, charming, and incredibly handsome Turk quickly charmed her with his speeches. He told her that he loved their country, and then he started saying that he loved Susan. He called her, my soul. My honey, my angel." She melted away from the compliments and looked at the photos in his profile for a long time, admiring the beauty of the Eastern man. Ahmed in the photos was driving luxury foreign cars, having fun with his friends in a luxurious club, and relaxing in a hotel. He had an incredible house with a gorgeous garden around. And all this life he offered to Susan because he fell in love. The girl couldn't believe her luck. However, she doubted to the last whether all these promises would remain empty, because he was so far away. However, the man began to care for the girl even at a distance. The courier often brought her bouquets of flowers and gifts. He sent her halva and other sweets by the kilo. A month ago, Ahmed texted her, "I sent you a present. Wait for the courier." But Ahmed himself appeared on the threshold of Susan's apartment instead of a courier. He stood with a bouquet of scarlet roses and smiled at Susan. A tall and swarthy man with black hair and eyes like hot coals. He was an actor from the TV series that Susan loved so much. He declared immediately, without greetings and superfluous words, "Susan, marry me. I love you more than my life." And everything swirled around. The girl was looking forward to the change and soared in seventh heaven with happiness. They decided to have a wedding in 3 months in Turkey. Ahmed told her for a long time about how wonderful their future life would be, in luxury, in prosperity, in love. He promised her the sky and diamonds. The man decided to stay with Susan until the move. The girl has an apartment in the capital, a gift from her parents. There was enough room for both. She showed the groom the capital. They walked together for a long time and counted the days until the wedding. The holiday was promised by the husband's parents. Relatives often called Ahmed, but the girl couldn't talk to them. She didn't know the language of the groom. She could only smile awkwardly, listening to how the Turk communicates for a long time with his mother, father, and brothers. Ahmed's conversation with his family could last for hours, and the girl liked it. A family man is a great happiness. So he will also appreciate his wife and children. She knew Spanish and German well. Perhaps this is what helped the girl to quickly master a third foreign language, adding knowledge of Turkish to the collection. Kirsten turned out to be an excellent teacher, in a simple way conveying the intricacies of a foreign language to an attentive and diligent female student. Also, the Turkish films that the female tutor advised her helped her a lot. As a result, after a little more than a month, Susan could already be proud of herself. She didn't speak perfectly, but she understood well when others spoke to her. She lacked live practice, but the opportunity to understand someone else's speech presented itself to her very soon. The future spouse once again called to relatives in a distant country. The girl tried to hold back a sly smile and began to listen. She sat on the couch nearby, pretending to be engrossed in the film. She wonders if she'll understand his words. However, what she heard shocked her to the core. Unfortunately, not in a good way. It turned out that he communicated with his brother, and at the same time, the foreigner shared with him about what future awaits him with his new wife. "I'll take her to us, and we'll sell her apartment. Then we can partially repay my debts. Of course, we don't have enough money. You know what problems our family has? By the way, how is our store? Are we out of options? We'll have to sell it, and we'll get out somehow." Then the man told the truth, which was absolutely terrible for the girl. "How is my Milem? Is she really worried?" "No, she doesn't know about Milem. This is considered cheating here. We will formally marry, and I will introduce Milem to her as my second wife. But I will have the first foreign wife. This is an honor for her. Let her enjoy it." The girl's mouth was dry, and the smile fell from her face. She must have misheard. And the man continued, "Of course she's acting terribly. Shame and shamelessness." And Susan, out of the corner of her eye, noticed that he was examining her dress, the skirt of which was a palm above the knee. He continued, "Here, everyone walks the streets like that. It's nice to watch, but I won't let my wife do that. The only thing she can wear is a hijab." He paused, listening to the interlocutor, and then nodded, "I will re-educate her. She will become silk. She won't raise her eyes from the floor without my permission. Okay, stop talking about her. You better tell me what's with the money." As a result of a long conversation, she realized that all the photos she saw were a bluff. She didn't know who owned the cars in the house. But the owner was definitely not the Turk sitting in front of her. Ahmed was poor. His family had many debts and loans, and he got into debt to come to another country, throwing dust in the girl's eyes. The girl didn't immediately fall into hysterics. She tried to calm down. Susan ended up walking around sad for 2 days, but she waited for Ahmed's second conversation, this time with his mother. But this dialogue angered her more than the previous one. Susan was washing dishes at the time. The plate slipped from her weakened hands, smashing a couple of cups in the sink with a crash. The man said into the phone, wincing, "Damn, she broke something." "Mom, she's a normal housewife. She's still young. She will do anything. You will teach her. Don't be afraid. I'll teach her whom she will serve. Of course to you. Yes, Mom, we will live according to Islam." Of course, Susan had heard before that a mother was extremely important to a Turkish man. He listens to her and follows her advice implicitly. But now she realized how much her groom is committed to this rule. She realized that she would not have her own opinion in his house. Chris was right about everything. Susan smiled very tenderly at her unscrupulous groom that evening. He answered her with the same smile and said, "My love, I spoke with my mother. She's looking forward to our wedding and your meeting." The girl answered him in Turkish, "Go to your mother and second wife and live with them, and get out of debt yourself, my dear." The girl was categorical and adamant, no matter how the dumbfounded Ahmed tried to justify himself, no matter how he kissed Susan's hands. She shouted in Turkish, throwing his things into the stairwell. "And by the way, I don't like halva, and I don't love you." An hour later, she was crying on the shoulder of her best friend who came to her on the first call. "Chris, I'm a fool, a naive blonde." The girl cried, rubbing tears and the remnants of mascara on her cheeks. "Why didn't I believe you right away? I wanted an easy and beautiful life. I'm an idiot. I thought that he would carry me in his arms, love me, like in the movies." Chris was silent. He just stroked the girl on the back, looking thoughtfully ahead of him. He suddenly said, "Do you know that they wanted to send me to serve in Alaska?" The girl nodded, not understanding what he was getting at. "I then wrote a refusal and asked to stay here. I wanted to be closer to you." She took a deep breath. She didn't know that Chris stayed because of her. And the guy continued, "And when you did start packing your bags, in general, I was recently offered a place in Alaska, and I signed the consent papers." The news sent a chill through Susan, sending goosebumps down her back and up her arms. Susan muttered, "Are you leaving now?" The girl couldn't blame him. It was right and fair. She wanted to arrange her life, and Chris must go his own way. But it didn't make her feel better to understand this. The guy nodded decisively. "I'll go there." And then he looked her straight in the eyes. "Will you come with me?" Susan blinked, uncomprehending. "What?" "Come with me, Susan." "How can I go with you? After all, only wives can go there." "Yes, then marry me. I've been in love with you since first grade, when I saw your braids with bows." He gently touched the girl's head, running through her hair. Confused, Susan tried to justify herself. "I thought you didn't feel anything for me. And I was afraid to hear a refusal from you. I was cowardly. I wanted to stay by your side, if only as a friend. And now I don't want to be your friend. I love you, Susan. Stop torturing me and be my wife." 10 years have passed since that day. Susan lifted her head from the laptop she was working on outside and looked around the playground. 2 boys hid behind the children's house, holding up their toy guns and pretending to be spies. The woman called the secret agents. "Andrew, Steve, let's go home. Dad will be here soon." The brothers immediately stopped their fun, obediently running up to their mother. She looked lovingly at her sons. Both children looked very much like Chris. All friends and relatives of the family noticed it. The girl sometimes grumbled that she gave birth and the children looked like their dad, but secretly, she was very proud of it. 10 years with Chris flew by in a flash. The guy seemed to have accumulated love in himself since childhood and splashed it out on his wife. He turned her life into a fairy tale, and she reciprocated. Who would have known that best friends can become a couple? So beautiful, sensual, and understanding each other's spouses from a half word. The husband supported Susan in everything. As a result, she was able to start her own business. Susan collaborated with colleagues, oversaw projects, and enjoyed her activities in life as a wife and mother. Of course, the girl didn't get to a warm country, to palm trees and the sun, but she left for the northern state, to snow and cold. But who would have known that it would be 100 times warmer here, because true love lived here.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.